Hello, everybody. So I'm an urban planner, and I work in the field of rainwater management. I've been doing that for 30 years now. And our problem is how to integrate water in the town. So rainwater integration, fluvial water, river water, and how, so given the different restrictions and constraints, how to find solutions for the urban environment. So I'm an urban planner. I'm specialized in urban hydrology, in fact. There we are. So when I talk about this, I talk about Lyon. I'm the fruit of the Bernard Chocas School, the GRAIE organization. So it's G-R-A-E-I-E. So Bernard Chocas and his group trained me. His laboratory trained me. They developed 20 or 30 years ago, and they continue to develop rainwater management methods, not linked to sanitation, but linked to the city, linked to the town, how to do that from an urban point of view. So it's important for us because it's a school of thought that has completely changed urban planning and urban development. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you about. So this first slide, therefore, explains the impact of a city on the water cycle. Perhaps you've already talked about this over the course of the webinars, but if we take the left-hand part of the screen, we can see that when it rains, you've got 10-year rainfalls, for example. And let's imagine this rain over a hectare. Over the 400 cubic meters, 200 cubic meters will be infiltrated, will go down into the ground. Some will activate the ground, will allow nature to develop, fauna and flora, and 100 cubic meters will go down into the water table, charge up the water table. So that's the water reserve that we have for rivers and waterways. And then out of the 400 cubic meters, 200 cubic meters will remain on the surface, and a large percentage will be evapotranspirated. And then only 10% will run off. So we're talking about 40 cubic meters that will be runoff water and will go down into the ground over 10 hours or so. So basically 40 cubic meters will, so 1 liter per second will go down over that hectare. So imagine connecting that space to a sewage system. So that will be with a small pipe because the flow rate will be very, very small. Now let's imagine, and this is the other side of the fence, let's imagine that for the same space we create a city. And that you have exactly the same rain. You've got the same volume. You can see that the city changes the water cycle. It is sealed and it prevents infiltration. So there's no more surface infiltration, so the soil becomes sterilized. There's no deep infiltration, the water table will disappear. And there will be a lot less evapotranspiration. And over the 400 cubic meters having fallen, 250 cubic meters will run off. So they will run down to the lower point and very quickly, unlike, you know, when you have plants. So everything will be very smooth, the pipes, the ground, so the water will run off very quickly. So the 250 cubic meters will go to the lower point, but in 1 or 2 hours. So this means that the flow rates will be 100, 200 liters per second. So if we want to retrieve this water, we've got to have a pipe that's not narrow, but has a diameter of over 2 meters. So it's the city that increases the runoff peak, and this will lead to flooding. So we won't be able to recover all of the water, so there will be a flood. When it rains in a city, first of all, what happens? Well, there's no more evaporation, there's no more infiltration, and you create flooding. Now, the idea today is to try and find natural processes in this green space and to put them in the city. So the idea, so this is another subject, obviously, the idea is not necessarily to put nature inside the city, but the idea is to put the natural processes inside the city. And this is why it's interesting, you know, the way you think about cities and the link with water. And so from a caricatural point of view, I wanted to present to you how progressively the perception of this, you know, problem in cities has changed, and how this is reflected in what we do today. So as time goes by, the more interesting it becomes. Increasingly, rainwater can be considered as a resource, and that's what's really interesting about the thing. And those who are able to initiate this global water approach are urban planners. And that's why I'm talking to you about this subject today. I've spent 5 minutes explaining it. So all of this is rather caricatural, but at the same time, it sets the scene. 30 years ago, it was the start where we were saying to ourselves, okay, we might have flooding problems in cities. It's not up to the pipes to solve the problems. We have to work on the city as a whole. So there was a hydrological problem linked to flooding, and we had retention basins that were introduced. So when it rains, okay, this is Montreuil. It's an old photo where at the top point of Montreuil, there's a slope. So it's a suburb of Paris. There was a big storm, and the water, as you can see, it doesn't go down the pipe, so it runs off. It's a bit like a torrent, in fact. So the idea at the time was to say, okay, as the pipes are too small to take on board all of this water, we've got to make them bigger. And of course, this involved quite a high cost, so it's complicated. So these retention basins were built. Now, a retention basin is a space where the water from the sewage system can be overflow, so that it doesn't go anywhere else, so that we don't have a flood anywhere else. And from an urban point of view, we can see that it's ugly. And secondly, it's a space which in reality doesn't serve any specific purpose. It's only going to be used when there is exceptional rainfall. So its use is really quite exceptional. So here you've got a pipe that arrives when there's a lot of rain. This pipe goes into this big retention basin. The water overflows from the pipe and fills up. I don't know if you can see the arrow when I move it, but it fills up this first basin and then this second basin. Yes, we can see the arrow. Great. So this is for, you know, rain that you get every 6 months. So it's kind of rainfall that you have every twice a year. So it can overflow into the second basin, and then for 5-year rainfalls, it will go into this second basin. So this space, so it's 3 or 4 kilometers from Paris. So it's a very precious space. This basin is going to be used 100% every 10 years for 3 or 4 hours, and the rest of the time it's not serving any useful purpose. So it's a space that was designed by water related engineers who had to manage water but didn't think about, you know, constraints linked to the city area. Then there was the water law that obliged each urban planner, each developer to take into account the water cycle when building. So it was the principle of the polluter payer. So the idea was to compensate the impact that they had on the cycle water using specific devices, and notably these retention basins that we've just said. So as soon as you seal off ground, you have to have retention basins. So there was this kind of basin that was built. We didn't really know how to go about things, and many. So this is basically a hole in a plot, and when it rains, this is where the rain comes. Sometimes it filters down into the ground. Sometimes it's really quite dirty, but sometimes it doesn't because the soil doesn't allow for this. So the basin evacuates, it empties very, very slowly towards the sewage system. And once the sewage system is not saturated anymore. So the water arrives, you can see the pipe, and the level goes up when it rains a lot. And then at the end of the rain, there's another pipe that we can't see. And that's where the water goes out at kind of a regular flow rate so that the sewage system is not saturated. And it's really not very pretty. So we've also made these underground structures. I won't give you all of the details. And then this is the worst example. This is an alveolus structure. It's an ultralight structure. It's a bit like a sponge. You put it in the ground, and it takes up, volume. It's available volume for receiving rainwater when there is exceptional rain. So, I don't like it, but I'm not a specialist. Rainwater, when it arrives in this kind of structure that's like a sponge, it's dirty. It's dirty, and it decants, and so it clogs things up. So it's a technical problem. You've got this sponge-like structure. It's currently being built. You put a tarpaulin over it, then you cover it with ground, with soil, and it's a bit like a big tank in the ground. Cars can drive over it. It's quite resistant. It's very practical, very practical. But in reality, it doesn't work very well. It's not durable. It's not lasting. And from an urban point of view, there's no advantage of having this kind of structure. So 20 years ago, we realized that these underground structures didn't work very well. And we said to ourselves, can we not integrate that into the city in a better way? So we started to say to ourselves, oh, well, a retention basin might be something that's more open, greener. So this again is a kind of an exaggerated example. It's a design office that sized its retention basin like this, and then it asked a landscape artist to put some plants around it. So it's a first form of integration, but it's almost a caricature if you ask me. Same thing here, the retention basin is in the middle. So this kind of area is terrible. The retention basin is terrible, but there's a kind of a consistency in the way things have been thought about here. You've got the industrial zone and the retention basin. They're not very pretty, either of them. So there's, there was thinking between hydrologists, urban planners, and other stakeholders. Then people said, well, in the countryside there are ditches. Why not have that in the city? And there are things called swales. A swale is a kind of a ditch. It's not very deep, and it takes off any water that arrives on the pavement. The water runs off into the swale, and the swale will be infiltrated. It doesn't join the sewage system, this water. You've got gypsum and clay. So the water runs off very slowly via the ditch. It's regulated by different structures, and it has the regular flow rate, and it goes down into the sewage system. So this device helps to regulate things so that the networks are not saturated, so that they don't overflow. So it's a retention device that we refer to as swales. And then we said to ourselves, it's so exceptional to have water in structures like this. Can we not do this in spaces that are completely open to the general public? So this is a project that's quite old now. It's a park where we were asked to set up a rainwater basin inside the park. So we said to ourselves, well, why not? Let's not have a fence. Let's just work on the shape of the park. Let's create relief. And if it rains, Well, if it's not too heavy, it will flood part of the park. And if it's a lot of rain, well, it will flood all of the park. All of that park will be underwater. So that's the kind of effect. This is a rainwater retention basin. So you can see that it's much better integrated into the greener park. It's the same thing here. This is a city. We said to ourselves, why not have the water in the city? And if there is to be a flood, let's develop spaces so that the flood is acceptable. So it's the city that acts as a support to the flood. So people understand this. So we've got these different structures. We've got pathways that are kind of higher up. So, and we've got the same vocabulary. People perceive that there is this hydrological function. They don't exactly understand what it's for, but they can see that it's something that's managed, and therefore it's not problematic. So I'm going very quickly. That's how the thing is filled up when it rains. So this is the same thing. It's a park. I'm going quickly because I can see that time is ticking. So it's a park that's in an urban environment, and this was financed as a retention basin. So this is the flood area, as you can see. So what's interesting here, because we're managing the rainwater, we've created a park. So in terms of use, the money spent to manage the rainwater is obviously used to manage the rainwater, but it's also used to create the park, and that's important. It's also a way to think about the city with multiple functions, multiple management modes, and that's where things are interesting for the town planner. So you can start to do different things. So I won't go into the details of the part, but here's the same thing. Well, it's the same thing. So here we had to decontaminate the rainwater. This is a filter that decontaminates the rainwater, and we've made it into a green space. So you see that there's a technical function. It's been landscaped. It looks very pretty. So 10 years ago, we said to ourselves, well, at the end of the day, we are there to manage rainwater, and we want to have something that's quite natural when it comes to the water cycle. And obviously, topography is a determining factor. So if we let the water run down according to the natural environment, we can redesign the city according to its geography. And so by solving these water problems, we can redesign things. So these are not very good examples, but this is an example in Brittany. It's a work site that's it's underway. So we had to build a new neighborhood on some agricultural area. That was the request.
Les eaux, et on va pas toucher, on va pas impacter le
We
cycle
didn't
de
want
l'eau
to impact the water cycle. We wanted to build around it.
par rapport à ces cheminements de l'eau.
So we built things according to the waterway. We didn't want to impact the water cycle. We didn't want to have to compensate it. And what's interesting here is that they're building around the waterway. So we've got the water structure. We've decided to add plants. So we've got a green channel and a blue channel.
Voilà, il faut que
Even where you have the plot, you can recover the water and you can send it in the open air, not underground, so that it can water the plants and trees. The water becomes active. So you've got these natural consequences, therefore, and we're part of those natural consequences. So you can see that the pedestrian pathways have been designed according to this. We've got a small ditch here.
Je crois que j'ai pas l'image, c'est dommage. Ce qui est intéressant, c'est que quand
What's
on sort,
interesting is that when you go out of your house, or even when you're in your house, you're already part of the water cycle. You're part of the water structure. You follow the waterway using the pedestrian pathway, and eventually you get to a small stream, and then a river, and then eventually you get to the sea. So everything's perfectly connected with the natural hydrographic environment. So everything's connected with nature. So it's a way to redesign the context and make it more natural. Now, unfortunately, in France, across the world, we're not always very good at doing this. So, but as we're part of the geography and part of the water cycle, so what we've built here is a reflection of the natural environment. So this is the kind of thing that we have as a result. This is another operation. So this water structure, it's something that's possible for very urban, so areas that are very much urban areas. So according to the geography and the water geology, because of the runoff, we start from the top point, we go to the lower point. So here we're alongside the Seine, and the Seine is going to flood the neighborhood during a flooding period. So it's a district that's been completely designed according to the water cycle. So look at this neighborhood. We've got storage on the roofs, we've got storage in the swales, we've got the decontamination area. So this is a floodable park. And this is a last retention basin here. These are swales, and then on the other side, you've got the Seine River. And then you've got some buildings here that are on pillars. So, you know, the water has been taken into account in the urban fabric, but also as part of the architecture. You can't necessarily see this, but when you look at it, you can see that that industrial area, that commercial area, has been completely designed with the water cycle in mind. So there, I've been through that quite quickly. So what's very interesting today is that we are mixing, we're having a much more global approach because the regulations have changed.
And today we have to deal with exceptional rain events, but we have to manage to small rain events, and with this water has to infiltrate. We don't want to run off into the networks, because this water, when it rains in town, it picks up all the pollution. Water picks up all the pollution on the roads, it concentrates the pollution, goes into the sewage system, picks up the pollution then, and since there is too much water, it goes into the natural environment. So when it rains, as soon as it rains in town, we polluting significantly the natural environment. So today, what we are being asked to do is to do pollution abatement, even with small rain events, wherever it is raining. So if we do a plot, it has to be permeable enough so that no water will run off from that plot. It has to be infiltrated, or it will be evapotranspirated. So it's a totally new, and it changes completely things, because we have to do a kind of a sponges town, a city. We have to manage exceptional rain events, small rain events, but in fact, by doing so, we can face other challenges or deal with other issues. There's the water, for example, nature in the city. Water is a driver to activate natural metabolism. So there we go. So today, there is a new understanding of water. For a long time, water had to be evacuated from the city, or it was a danger, put dikes or, retention ponds. No, we said now the city has to give place to water. It's a new approach. And likewise, we reconsider water as a resource. It used to be a waste, effluent. Now it is a resource. So it makes it possible to all this entire approach makes it possible to do a lot of things in the city that were not possible 20 years ago. Because 20 years ago, when we had the retention pond or the floodable park, I mean, you want children to get drowned, you're criminals, you integrated getting water into the city. You're getting the fox into the hen in the. Anyway, so you got it. So a couple of examples there. Yeah, this is a river in Hub near Brussels, and within this framework, among the covering, we do a major pedestrian more, but within this pedestrian thing, okay, we collect rainwater from the district. This rainwater, then they are filtered, we control the water, we absorb it, we generate nature, and so on. And mainly, we say, okay, what we want is to create a freshness as well, to make sure that in summer, it'd be nice to be in that district. So on this promenade, we did several stopping point with a lot of vegetation, which refreshes, cools down the temperature. But in summer, unfortunately, it doesn't rain, and it's especially when there were heat waves, and we didn't have enough water, rainwater, to hydrate this vegetation. So we said, okay, what we're going to do, we'll take advantage of the fact that there is a groundwater table to collect water from the table. When it rains, we charge the table, we force water efficient to charge the table. We use it as a major storage tank, and in summer, and only in summer, we'll come and collect a bit of water to hydrate the vegetation and make it as shady and evapotranspirant, agreeable and rich as possible to generate freshness. So you see the water cycle is used in all its dimension, put to the service of the city, and in a fairly, it's kind of a caring approach. So clearly we are in natural processes. There is landscaping, hydrology, architecture. Who can have a global vision to do this? Well, the urban planners, urban designers. So I rely on you to change the city. Thank you. And this is I spent 25 minutes. I would like to, didn't talk about this operation. I'll talk about the operation, this one. Okay. That's a major urban business park in the Ile-de-France and a major zone, 2 kilometers from Paris. I talk about it because this is the advertising image of Eiffage, which is the main real estate developer of all this. But you see, Dozac is fully green. This zone is fully green. That's advertising. But nevertheless, what I'm saying is that in reality, well, that's reality. Not that I want to do advertising for Eiffage, but that's reality. Why? Because they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice, and now they want to. They want to. At the beginning, they told us, we told them, okay, it has to be your new your no zone. We'll have to meet all water management constraints, do pollution abatement in small rainfalls, manage major rainfall events, but we want water to be a global resource, so it has to be open sky, gravity, runoffs, and it has to provide water to a park. So therefore, for each building, you see there is a green roof. Each building has a green roof, 50 to 60 centimeters of earth to buffer the rainwater, because you have to do that. So the architect had to integrate that aspect. Even the landscaper had to take this into account. So we're no longer in communication. It's not just a bit of green paint. It's 50, 60, sometimes 1 meter. In one of the meters, there's 1.5 meter of land, of earth, soil, to have a true vegetation, which is water fed. So there could be great vegetation. Then we said water will to run open sky. That is, they have to come out of the building for the most exceptional rain events with only a little drop that will get to the will go to a park. So the architect took into account the fact that water will run on the footpath and on the pedestrian, on the cobway. Sorry. So if we put water in a pipe, we'll lose it. It will go into say. But if we have it in surface, it remains a resource. So we work with all the architects, for the, it runs on the walkways. So we don't, architects don't want that. So we add them to, some architects were very happy, and because it's a resource for the building, and others, they didn't like it. But eventually they all agreed with that water on the sidewalks. And to say that what happened was that well, we had to exploit this vegetalized nature Eiffage were able to communicate on this. They were happy, but in reality, what do we do with this? 50, 60 centimeter. Well, company called Lugo, the company called Lugo, well, they said, okay, well, they went to say, Eiffage, okay, well, we do urban farming. We exploit such surfaces or vegetation. And so what we suggest that you give us we pass us a contract you for free, and we will manage them. We'll do urban farming and agriculture, and we'll do our economy there. And so thanks to water, basically, the real estate developers were able to say, okay, great, we'll be able to claim, environmental qualities which are very, very strong. They don't want to save the world; they want to make money. Let's face it. But they want to have a green image like that. When we said that they're going to the urban farming, yeah, agriculture, but in terms of image for them, to sell a building is great. Even more so that the company said, well, in fact, give us just a little shelter in the park, and we'll come and sell the products, the producers from the roofs. And therefore, it's like short circuit farming, let's face it. And where they went very far, and that maybe a bit too far, they said, if people will work on there, will be people who will do social reinsertion, so they're also going for the social dimension. So therefore, so I'm saying they do this, and now, it's quite advanced now. And indeed, it's green like that because they tick all the boxes, green boxes. Well, good, because, fundamentally, this, in terms of hydrology and nature into the city and the role of water, it's an exemplary for those sites. What's interesting is that it also meets approaches which are economic, or political, and this is as long as if it's not interesting economically, it's not done. So, sorry about that. So here, in fact, through water management, we are able to initiate this approach. And therefore, you can see that contrary to the beginning of my presentation, where I put the retention ponds very much like, all over the city, but thanks to water, there is an obligation to do, and we have the financial means because they're very high, and we have the political means. All this to say, and I will conclude. We're only 5 minutes late, so we work on the urban planning program. So to to apply to, you have to work with the landscapers strongly. This is how it can translate. So these are a few examples. This is another example. Within a plot, you see it's very green. Water generated that. But it implies to work with the architects, the design office, environmental design office, real estate developers. We work on that. Well, no, our work is no longer technical, but we want to get a lot of people around the table to work together and to make sure that this natural metabolism, which is activated by rainwater, will find its whole dimension, and that everybody is happy to do it. So it's collaborative work, where clearly, once again, and I'm done now. Thank you. I hope I did not take too much time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Christian, for this presentation and the historical context and where we stand today. It's an interesting aspect. I forgot to introduce you, so I just reminded that you are the founder of Urban Water, and as we've seen, you work on the topic of water in town, the renaturation at different scales. Thank you, Adrian. You can introduce Sofia. Sofia is an engineer and doctor in material science, and she did a PhD on magnetically assisted flocculation after water treatment. Now she deals with the European project within the SIAAP innovation project, and which is a public sanitation utility. So this is part of the program Machine Innovation of this organization, and she will talk today about the development of bathing water quality forecasting tool. Sofia, you have the floor. Thank you for your kind presentation, Adrian, and thank you for this very kind invitation to this most interesting webinar. As you said, I work in the SIAAP, in the innovation department, and I'm in charge of the Digital Water City project for the Île-de-France, Greater Paris region. So this is the project and the tools developed within the framework of the project from the Île-de-France region and the Basins site. So a quick word about the Digital Water City project. It's a European project, Horizon 2020, run by the Kompetenzzentrum Wasser Berlin. It started in June 2019 till the end of the year. And this project will create links between the physical world and the digital world via the development of open source digital solutions. That's part of the requirements of the European Commission H 2020. So they should all be digital, had to be open source, and they are necessary to overcome face different water-related challenges while involving the citizens in the management. And 5 European cities are there: Paris and its region, Copenhagen, Berlin, Sofia, and Milan. And based on the requirement of each city, they will develop digital solutions which are specific. Now, prior to going into the project, let me introduce the principles, the pillars, 3 pillars for the project. First is cybersecurity, so that all the solutions are digital solutions. It's all very well, but they have to be safer. So there is a panel which is oriented on the safety of all the safety and development of solution. Second, the interoperability. We are developing digital solutions for 5 cities, European cities, and the idea is that such solutions which are open source should be adaptable to other cities in Europe or in the world. Last pillar, and I'll come back to this more later in detail, it has to be accepted by the final users. Thank you. So the project in Greater Paris, well, we want to develop a bathing water quality forecasting tool. So the future managers of bathing site will manage their sites. It's a tool that could be used for the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games that will be used in Paris in 2024. And the heritage of the games will be the possibility to swim in an urban area in the potential sites that you see on the map here. Now, in order to reach such objectives, there are several development lines, as well as we have partners. So in the SIAAP, we work together with Sorbonne University and the Berlin Water Competence Center to access the modeling of the quality of bathing water, which is the thesis of a student called Paul Dupin. And then the EWS is an early warning system for the quality of bathing water, and this is developed by Berlin, which will be calibrated for the Paris regions. And we work with the INRAE as well. They study the sociological issues or stakes associated with the dissemination of information to water quality to the local population. And the last partner for this project is Floridian. It's a private company which is developing a rapid on-site system, measurement system called ALERT, which will indicate the fecal and the bacteria, the E. coli and intestinal Enterococcus, which are 2 indicators for bathing water. So to summarize this project, it has 4 deliverables. For Floridian, deal with the ALERT, the measurement device. The Berlin water system developed the provisions tool with SIAAP and Sorbonne. And the SIAAP, well, we developed 2 applications, one expert application, which will be intended to the managers of bathing sites and a public application for those in Ile-de-France. And to understand how all these will be assigned and how this will work together, there is the following general concept. Well, there is the prediction concept of the bathing quality that will develop quality forecast of quality. Then the forecast, in addition to additional information, will be sent to the first application called the expert application, which is the management interface that will regroup all the information needed by the managers to make the decision. Does it open or not the bathing site? Once the decision is made, this is collected by the public application, and we will inform the citizens about the status of the bathing site of the site. And then in addition to that, the various measuring devices, alert or other devices, which will be used by managers, can be used in the three situations. So either to validate the forecast made, they can be sent to the expert application to help the site manager in the decision-making process, and they can be sent to the public application to inform the citizens about the local citizens or the local community about the quality of the water they're bathing in. Now, I'll get into details about the operation of the three deliverables, the forecasting tool and the true application. I'll try not to be over technical, to remain general. Well, this tool, as I said, is a tool that has been developed by the Berlin Water Competence Center, and it's already used, and we want to recalibrate it so that it will be adapted to the French region. This tool is a machine learning based system. It is based on a statistical model, and its daily application is such that we are able to feed this model continuously with flow rate data for the effluents from the treatment plant, from river, for rainfalls, and the model will establish a correlation between all the data, and it will provide a quality data, knowing the flow rate in some outfalls and rainfall. If you have this outfall and this rainfall, that will have so many E. coli, so much content of E. coli, which will have to be measured compared with other measured data to validate the statistical model. Now, the problem we have with that is that a lot of changes will take place in the Paris sanitation system, the infection of a wastewater treatment plant, correction of some poor connection, correction of several storage works. So changes that will factually impact the quality of water, but in the right direction, that is to improve the quality. And the problem there, the statistical model is, it learns from the data we feed it. But those data, we don't have them. So we don't have this data. So we'll be two new models. The first model, which is the hydraulic model, in which all changes that will take place will be implemented on the sanitation system will be included. So we'll have new flow rate data according to the changes. This is what you'll get as flow rate or content, and this data will be integrated to a new deterministic model. This is part of the PhD, and this prose deterministic model will generate quality data, future quality data. So we'll have the future quality in all points of the Seine and Marne rivers. And this new data will be used to recalibrate the statistical model so that it can produce for future forecast of the basin quality. So in order for you to understand what this is about, so what it is like, so it's an interface developed by our colleagues in Berlin. So there is a management interface that manages not only several basin sites, but also prediction forecast model, and also it manages data, as you can see here. Well, it groups data we need according to the sites and the forecasting model. We can do everything on site. We don't need to have different locations. And then, in addition to that, we've started working on the Iéna Bridge in Paris, which is the site for the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris in 2024, to have a first forecast model for Iéna Bridge. The result we got so far were not good quality ones, because it is based on the 2016 to 2019. So far, modification have not been applied. And as I said, the statistical model is machine learning. If you give it only data which are of not good quality or not good quality, well, you won't have a good quality afterwards. So this is where PROS will intervene with the new better quality data, which takes into account all changes that will be made to the sanitation system. And there is also qualification function, planning function, because we don't know what they want to ask for. If they want to have a daily forecast, morning, afternoon, we don't know that, so it's being debated. So there is this planning function which has been installed, and therefore we be able to plan the development of a forecast as a function of the manager's requests. When it comes to the development of the application, well, this is the third pillar. That is, it has to be accepted by the end users. The design and the development of application is based on a quite original approach. We wanted to co-design the tools with the future users. In our case, are the future basin site managers and the public, a general public. So we created a users community, a COP, we call it a COP, community of practice, and therefore we'll design the applications. On the one hand, they will tell us what they need in terms of applications so that we can give it to them, and also create links between the various future managers to be able to exchange about the various ideas associated with the management of the bathing site, discussion with the general public. And general public, our colleagues in the INRAE who are doing focus group and interviews to collect the opinions of what they think about the building of the future bathing site, and also if there is a public application that exists, well, what kind of information would they like to have inside it? And based on this concept, we are able to develop certain trust for the tool. They be able, since they will co-design the tool, they will trust, and we're developing tools that will meet the needs of the future users. One of the first questions we ask ourselves, those are the members with which we work, who are part of the community of users we have the city of Paris, youth and sport, Olympic Games, Paralympics, major events, the departmental council of Alderman, Saint-Denis, Marne-Vive Syndicate, EPT 12, RSAS, and all municipalities which applied for the Paris Olympics, and they're part of this community of users that don't know if they will have a bathing site or not, but they've been included in that community, that even if today they don't have a bathing site, if in 5, 10, 15 years they decide to have one, they will know that tools do exist for which the conception of which they contributed, and they can use them for the bathing site. So the first question I was saying for the applications, what type of applications do we want to provide to the future users? Well, initially we had two ideas. Well, either a mobile phone application, which could be downloaded through any tool, and a website. As you can see, of course, there are negative and positive aspects in both cases. The mobile phone application, you download it on your phone, so you can see it only on the phone, and it takes a lot of space on the phone. The website, well, it's not practical to open on a mobile phone if you just want to check where you can go and get a swim. So the service provider proposed this alternative solution, which is called progressive web application. You develop a website with a computer and mobile phone format. And of course, the idea is that it is possible that, be it Android or Apple, it is possible to download a link that will appear as a little, you see a little icon on your phone, but it's not an app, so it does not expire any space on your phone. But by clicking on the icon, it sends you directly to the website and to the application. So you see, it's actually practical. It has been validated by the community and well received. And conclude with two short videos to show you today. We got two models for the public and expert and public application. Don't pay attention to the colors and the images for the time being. They're just model, work in progress. But I wanted to show you what it looks like and what it could look like tomorrow. So that's the public application with the mobile phone, bathing in Marne and in Seine, in Seine. So status, is it open, closed, risk of closing? There is a map with the possible geolocation. That each of the purple point will have the status of the bathing site, the list of all the bathing sites with the name of the site, location, and status, open, closed, not. And then in the map, so you click on map, you back to the map, and then you see the list of all the bathing sites that can be scrolled down. And if you got more, you can see more. And the idea is that by clicking on the bathing site page, by going on the page of bathing site, you get to this page, the name, the map tells you where it is with the location, general information, who's manager, where's the site, how to get there, status, bathing profile, and EU classification, a couple of photos of the site, and of course the weather forecast real time in the bathing site. Then we have several types of information to be displayed. So specific information, technical information like water temperature, depth. Is there watch is a bathing watch, and we got the comfort. Is there vegetation? What are the characteristics of the beach? Gravel? Is it washable? Is it sand? And the other information is bien sûr practical information. And the level of site, what is authorized, what is prohibited, what is accessible, what are the periods of the opening hours and closing hours, the parts, how many persons are, what's the number of visitors or users, and also, annex activities, biodiversity, local biodiversity. Will there be specific vegetation at the level of the bathing site, and possibly the little key contact us, which make it possible, which sends to a pre-filled form, and therefore they can, if there is a concern, they can send it directly to the manager and to the logo of all the entities that will manage the bathing site more specifically. And that what you see at the bottom, there will be the logo on the left, the research key, frequently asked questions, and the last logo, which will be, it's not regulation, it's a vigilance. I mean, that it means that it is a awareness raising to bathing in the fresh water, to explain what the risk associated with free water bathing in boats, children, everything, sharks, you name it. So all this is the vision on your computer. Once it will be open, it will look like that with the research bar on the left, and the list of all the bathing site, and the page of the bathing site will come like this on the computer.
So you've got the map and all of the information just below. You've got the form and the different logos of the representatives and the people in charge. So that's the public application. Now, with respect to the expert application, it's a little bit more technical. So we've used the same model, so progressive web application. So here we've got the view on the computer. So as it's an application that's much more technical, it's important to have a login and a password to get into the application. So each manager will have their own login and password so that they can access the data. So when you connect up, you get to the home page. So you've got to be careful. There's a little blog on the side. So you've got this strip on the side with all of the information. So you've got a strip above as well that I will detail in just a minute. And here you've got the central information. So information required for the manager, bacteriological analyses, flow rate, number of people per day, river flow rate, rainfall, etc. And then there's a color code that's going to be set up. So a search bar. There's a notification bell in case there is an alert, a warning, discharge that wasn't planned, for example, or some kind of problem. Any kind of warning will be sent to that page. And then you've got the procedure and the list of people to be contacted, the profile of the person with all of their information that they can modify. Then there's the possibility of managing several bathing sites. Let me take the example of Paris, the city of Paris. It has several bathing sites, so you don't have to have several logins and passwords to manage all of the sites. You can just use the same login, and you can also access the calendar. You can view data over a longer period, therefore, and you can export that data. Depending on the number of devices installed on the spot for measuring, you can select the devices with the data that you want. You can also access the platform page and you can sample directly. So there's going to be a button installed here to do that. So you can have quality predictions, you can view that over several weeks. So rainfall, you've got much more information about rainfall here over a 24-hour period, so the totals. So there'll be several pluviometers installed. So you can choose the pluviometer that you want to check. And we realized when we were talking that it would be difficult for managers that every time they go to the pluviometry page that they have to select these pluviometers. So that's why there is a favorites page. So right from the beginning, the manager can select all of the pluviometers that they're interested in, along with flow rates, discharge, and there are over 150, and the wastewater treatment plants. Once they're on their pluviometry page, only the ones that they're interested in will appear. It's the same for river flow rate, treatment plant flow rate. You've got also the number of visitors, the area view, which I was referring to earlier on. You can see all of the different bathing sites, the last status, the last quality measurements carried out, and finally, you've got the decision-making page. So once all of the data has been analyzed by the manager, they can directly go to the interface and decide whether to open the site or not. They can send information. This is a request that was made, especially, if you will have to send information to the regional health authority. So you can see why the decision was made. You've got the history of decisions made with the explanations that are recorded. So this information can be exported so that it can be shared, for example. A telephone ringing. So there we are. That was my last slide. So I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Sofia, for that presentation. It follows on from this idea to integrate water and nature in cities. So it was very, very interesting. We're going to finish now with a presentation given by Adrian Torres, who's an architect trained in Barcelona, Valencia, Salvador, Bahia, and Arus. So he's an urban architect, a landscape architect. He's part of the Lyon School. He's part of water, nature, and urban matters, and he's in charge of the Greater Geneva project, the Great Crossing. He is exploring different experimental variables and action research possibilities. Today, he's going to talk about the urban hydromorphological memory. Thank you very much, Claire-Lise. So thank you, everybody. So Christian Piel has talked to us today about the relationship between water and urban matters, perhaps in some projects for future cities, for peripheral areas, or the spaces in new cities. Over the past 15 years, I've been very impacted by this wish to understand what's happening with existing cities when it comes to historical contexts. So we've got this idea of an urban hydromorphological memory, you know, as a tool for the future, how this impacts the interpretation of our cities and contemporary towns, but what about in the future? So we can reinterpret things and look at pre-existing hydromorphology and use that as a tool so that we can green what already exists. So I work on water, nature and urban matters, but also the civil society, human beings as drivers for the transformation of urban areas, the nature between the relationship between the water and the city, and different phenomena-based variable. And I also focus on the question of governance. I did my doctoral thesis and I'm following different types of research at the École Urbaine de Lyon. This is my original city. It's Valencia on the eastern coast of Spain, so with 1 million inhabitants. So 2 million if you take into account all of the suburban areas. And there are two rivers. There's a river that has dried up, and we'll talk about why. And then there's a river built as of the 60s. It was a derivation channel that takes the water away from the city because there was a fear of flooding. So this is a project that was developed during the Franquist period in the 60s and 70s. So this is the city today, the contemporary city. You can see that there is this irrigated part here. There is a lot of market gardening here. So it's one of the biggest irrigated cities in Europe, in Andalusia. It certainly is the biggest. A lot of fruit and vegetables are exported. And then the Valencia region has been recognized for its wealth of market gardening and fruit and vegetable production. It's been recognized by UNESCO for this. And that is the city. Not that long ago, so at the end of the 19th century, you can see that it's a city. It's isolated from the coast by 4 kilometers. There's a big, a field for fruit and vegetable growing, and there's the river, and there's a complex of different irrigation channels called effikia. It's a word that comes from Arabic. It's used in North Africa, in Morocco, for example. But as I was saying, what is the morphogenesis of this urban area? It's something that I've always been interested in since I was little. I wanted to find why we had this urban shape, why we had this historical center, why was it the way it was? And, I always wondered about it because it seemed to be quite chaotic because we've got these different curves, these strange curves, that must be related to history, different marks, strange marks. And for me, as an architect, as an urban planner, thinking about new cities and houseman and, all of these orthogonal dimensions that we have in cities, there are different stereotypes of different city structures, but there are all these urban marks. And I was passionate about this specific city. I wondered how, we didn't have this degree of experiential wealth in other modern cities. It's not a historian's city. It's just my perception. But the historic context often gives us more complexity compared with modern cities. So I wondered where the shape came from. So I started by creating this, a superimposition of all neighborhoods of the city. So I superimposed these different neighborhoods. There are some lovely neighborhoods with walls around fields, so different agricultural plots. Sometimes, so this is from the start of the 18th century. We've got olive groves and these different natural agricultural plots inside the city. We've got irrigation channels inside this city, so inside the walls of the city. So this superimposition of maps was interesting. There's this one, for example. This is from the 19th century. From each one, I extract the different hydrographic information, some that's disappeared from the map today. There are different microtopographies that have an influence, however. So if we look at this map and we replot the different layers, we can see that the Roman foundation of the city has been replaced. Even if there aren't too many different levels, this is located in the highest part of the city. And then we have the Arab walls from the 9th and 10th century that link the topography. And then the Roman city here kind of forms a circle around the rest. So this superimposition of historical maps, and I enjoyed doing that work. I really had, it really was a passion for me. So I used different teledetection methods, LIDARs. I wasn't just superimposing history. I wanted to see in detail these different microtopographies. I wanted to compare with satellite views to see what they corresponded to. So then we can go back to this idea of the morphogenesis of the city. You can see that there's a big lake here. So this afternoon we'll be talking about this in more detail. And that there was this river with a meander. And this allows us to understand the foundation of the city. It's a fluvial island, the island of St. John. And this was surrounded by water in the past. So this is really, right at the origin of the foundation of the city. And in the Arab period, after the 8th century, you've got this density, and a Roman historian described the city as being above the river Tolia. So today it's in the north it's to the north of the Roman foundation. So there have been lots of development, lots of transformations according to the morphology of the city. And then there's Carmona. So this was the pillar of my research. So you can see these different meanders. So there's a hydromorphological memory. There are different channels that were dried up, different paleo channels that influence the the urban shape and the wall, the Arab wall. That's why it has this shape. So I started to work on some hypotheses. As I was saying, I was talking about the St. John's Island. So today, I realize that all of this coincides with different runoff courses that had an influence on the construction of the wall. So there's a first line here. So there's a first line. So there's this runoff line. It's a braided runoff. There's very little slope, but it can be found in the urban shape of the city. In the past, there was a big flood and that deviated water to the south. And there's another indicator here, another clue. When the Christian wall was demolished to extend the city area, the water, this wall had a dual function. In fact, it protected access to the city from water, and people had forgotten about that. And so the water managed to get into the historic city center. And so you can see these old meanders of the river. So from a natural point of view, from a morphological point of view, all of the landscapes were transformed. There were different channels that appeared, that disappeared, etc. But the hydrology, the geography has kind of stayed. And then there were the irrigation channels built by the Arabs, linking up with the Roman structure. So there was a kind of a wisdom that was executed. And of course, it's very important to have the microtopography to be wise enough to build to the north and to the south. And we'll talk about that in more detail this afternoon. So I started to analyze these different irrigation channels, and I realized that in the Arab period, all of these irrigation channels were integrated into the city. So that's why we had these curvy shapes, these diagonals. They were the irrigation channels from the peri-urban period. So they have been taken on board in the current shape of the city. So then I started superimposing more maps. I worked on different hypotheses for the hydrogenesis of this city. We've got these different shapes, and they are in fact the meanders of the different channels. We've got the natural runoff, and when the city became domesticated, you know, there were different fields that had to be cultivated. And all of these irrigation channels that had a very strong influence on the urban shape. And that's when you know, the walls were built and doors had to be created so that people could get into the fields. So the story of the city tells us about the hydromorphology of the city and these different natural aspects. So I won't go into more details. So there were different convents linked to all of this. There were different influences. There was the arrival of industrialization, although we can still see some natural plots inside of the city center. So I started working on a specific methodology. For example, with the Arroyo with this irrigation channel, we can find this point where there was a mill dating back to the 10th century with double arches, a place for the mill itself. So sometimes you can find Roman inscriptions on these structures. You can find construction equipment. But the presence of this mill tells us that, well, if you're going to have a mill with a horizontal mill like this, of course you need a difference in terms of slopes. So the river might have been closer to the mill than it is today. So there again, this takes us to the morphogenesis of the city. So here's a southern meander that has dried up. This is the Valley, and sometimes you find markets where you had this irrigation channel, which is now underground. So there are different structures. There's an underground car park, for example, where there's a lot of water. It was very difficult to build this. You had to pump the water, freeze the water. So an incredible performance. So this tells us about something that we've already talked about. You know, this urban piezometry, you know, looking at the groundwater, how we can benefit from it. Do we use the water table as a tank? Do we use it for irrigation purposes? But also it's something that can support, you know, high trees. Here along the Arab wall in the north, here along this wall, there was a ditch, And we can see the ditch in the maps of the 18th century. And again, we can see the hydrology of the area. And in the present, we can see that there are sections of the wall with different urban areas. And there's a project that focuses, a cultural project, a musical project that focuses on this area. So water, it's not just about infiltration in this city. It's about recreating different marks, different natural areas that talk to us about a different humanity. So here the valley is channeled. So we refer to it as the covered valley. So you can see all of these, the plotted lines. We can see the hydromorphology. We can then put the present map on top of that. So this was in 2017, I believe, 2015 to 2018. So there are areas that have been forgotten about, different kind of wastelands, urban wastelands. Spain, in the south, there have been different economic crises, real estate crises, various crises. It seems to be a perpetual crisis, in fact, in Spain. But these red spaces are urban wastelands where the population has aged, where there's been a lot of real estate speculation, where there's been an exodus from the center towards other areas. So that's why we have these urban wastelands, this surface area. So today some have been built up, but today there's still a lot of emptiness. So this gives me this map, therefore, after that last superimposition. So again, we've got the memory of the water, the hydromorphological memory of the water, and we've got vacant spaces, spaces that have been abandoned and with pre-existing trees. This is what I refer to as the urban pedestre. So this brings us back to the question of if we can design according to the hydromorphological memory, then how do we go about things in the future, given what we have in the present? So in yellow, we've got the urban wastelands that correspond to the hypothetical plotted line from the southern meander. So, there are different possibilities, different potential here. Thanks to this memory from a past time. But when we talk about classified neighborhoods, often we want to align things in the 18th century, in the 19th century, etc. But why do we talk about this alignment? If we've got this these different layers, why not go even further? Why not go beyond the 19th century alignment and maybe introduce marks that refer back to an even more distant past? So all of these wastelands, for example, they tell us about another urban possibility. These are spaces. So I'm continuing to work with the graphics. I'm continuing. So the idea is not to go backwards, because obviously you can't, the city has already been built, but why not work on the landscape and establish criteria for the existing city? So I've chosen Valencia because it's a mineral neighborhood. There are lots of monuments, there's lots of stone. It's a bit like Paris or Lyon, etc. And I realize that there is the presence of other aspects, anthropological aspects, agricultural aspects that take us back to the past. So this project echoes Bourg, Copenhagen, Victoria, and other interesting projects in India, Chennai, for example, with water tanks. Existing water tanks that became more formal with the English, and some mad projects as well, like in New York, where they consider the whole network in New York as a complete network, or in Brazil, there are technical solutions, rain gardens, infiltration basins, and phytoremediation. So it's how to think about the town from the point of view of plants and their remedial, their remedying effects. So when I talk about all of that, I think to myself, I'm mad. Well, the city has already been built. You can't rebuild it. But at the same time, there are other projects focusing on rivers, Cheng Ching Chong, for example, in Seoul, where there was a reversal. They went backwards. There was a kind of retrospective hypothesis. They didn't redo things the way they were, but you know, if there is a political willpower, you can go back to the way things were. This is Valencia, so it has a torrential regime. And so it would be, so it's obviously there is flooding with a lot of damage. And as I was saying, we've got this urban park. It's a great treasure in the city. Franco wanted to have a motorway going through the city. It's very functionalistic, but thanks to civil society that fought against it during the first democracy to make sure that the Toria River could belong to people and could continue to be green. So this led to the building of this artificial river, so a big divide, a huge lesion, and there was no water because the water demand for the rice fields, for example, was such that you know, there was practically no water in this man-made channel. So there are two rivers in the city. So this research looks at the heat islands, looks at sources, looks at, you know, we use thermographic tools. So the urban environment is visible from these thermographic images. So we can see that, you know, the urban context has adapted over the course of time. So there's kind of biotopic urbanity. So in Lyon, I've been very much involved in citizen participation, and I think it's important to be a militant in order to transform water, given the urban context, given you know, the atmosphere, given the complexity of different water uses. So today, we can't use our different urban aspects. We have to demand that these spaces be free so that we can use them. And here's one example. So these spaces that are sometimes abandoned, that tell us about different urban strata and tell us about, you know, the former river, the memory. So with the economic crisis, we built some real alliances thanks to these spaces. So you can see the different vegetable gardens. So let me talk to you about Patrick Guedes, who in India did this. In 1917, he set up urban plans, and this is what he was asked to do. And he said, no, let's do a very detailed analysis, he said. And that's what they did. They looked at different things. They looked at the presence of trees, and trees are sacred when it comes to Indian culture. And then you have the temples, the post-colonial period. And so he created openings inside this Indian favela instead of doing what was normally done. So there's the memory. So you've got a kind of an oil splat that's getting bigger when you look at this.
This was the case in Valencia, and this you know, we put the gates to the fields. So now it's evolving, considering the old metropole, and what we see is that the old walls built in the 15th century and today are the roads, you know, ring roads, which very much like in the, you know, they produce fragments, you know, natural with the irrigation channels within the So those are new green spaces, and I don't know if I have more time, but if I'm running out of time, okay, we have to move on to the Q&A session. But you can see the irrigation channel that cross the road, and there is a river, you know, anthropic rivers, but they're hidden under the urban tissue. Fabric and published an article to widen this methodology to the metropole, and we continue with the issue of the territory and the Lyon metropole. Thank you.
Alors, je sais qu'il y a des choses comme ça.
I know there are things like that, but I'm not so much in favor of this technique, well, maybe because it is associated with risk and associated with geography. Well, I mean, what's since the beginning, you know, what I want to do is how to find gravity flows, how to restore natural processes. When you build a city, it means that, you know, means that you have to find this topography to understand how it takes place. So there is all work associated with the ground, the terrain, all this process. So that once we've finished the design, we certainly it will work, because it has to function fundamentally. So, I mean, you know, there is the digital aspect, sensors, you know, smart cities, why not? But when it comes to risk management, I think it integrates a form of fragility, which is, for me, is not compatible. I mean, it's not compatible, but which I don't include in that approach. Well, I could add something. It is true that for us, it is digital water city. This is where we stand, you know. But the idea of all the solutions we are developing, you know, but water, you know, in Paris and elsewhere, is to include we want to have solutions without disturbing what already exists. To talk about sensors, probes, digitalization. Sensors are more and more used, you know, measurement sensors or you know, measurement tool developed by our collaborators at Floridian is a cylinder which is in the water, you know, which measures the water. And it's more practical because some parameters, you know, the follow-up of E. coli is associated with the health care of the bay, you know, of the public, you know, so there could be a risk. So we want to use sensors which are reliable and which make it possible to have a result that would be as safe as possible when it comes to the health of the bather. But the idea is not to install a sensor and to disturb the natural resource. We don't want to we don't want to damage what already exists. We want to make sure that we will install a sensor so that it will merge into the landscape and it will not disturb everything that is already installed. This is the idea of digital water cities. All the solutions, we are more on the river and the natural environment. All the tools are developed for the sanitation network, and this course that it will cause for some construction, but all the constructions, all the modification, all the developments are made as to have an assessment between the positive and negative, so that it will provide always more positive than negative. We know that there is a risk. Bathing is prohibited in Seine and Marne since a long time, I think the 60s or even before that. There was a decree from the prefecture which prohibited bathing, so we know there is a risk. Now, the difference we have that today cities which would like to open a bathing site do not know what it is. What are the challenges for the opening of a bathing site? What it means in terms of work? They have a very limited idea about the regulations, and that's why what we've done in our project, what I organized with my colleagues, that we went to look for real bathing site managers, people who already work on the bathing site management in the town, in the lot, in the land, people who already manage that, and they have a very deeper knowledge of a sanitary risk of the management of bathing site now, and they came and shared their experience and with our community, so that today the community knows that there is a community sanitary or health risk. But the development of the tools, we want to also establish a form of trust. If they trust the tool, and if the tool say yes, you can swim, bathe there because the quality measured is good, well, it's they're sort of comforted in their choice, in their decision to open the bathing site. Yeah, because today several studies have been carried out. The two parameters which been followed, but is fecal indicating bacteria, E. coli, and intestinal bacteria. But the best representative of quality water is the E. coli, because it is the indicator of a recent pollution, where the enterococcus will be older pollution. So often I have this, why don't you have other elements? But today, be it in the water directive or the level of the sanitary regulation, where E. coli is the leading, if I could say so, and the thresholds which are set today concern mainly E. coli, because it is the best representative of bathing water quality. I agree with you when you say it's nice to forecast and check and to warn, but you have to go to the source. This is why, following the proposal from Paris to welcome the European Games, the SIAAP organized the sanitation master plan with a bathing part, which included the list of all the works which are in the French Paris and region and small, and eventually do some kind of take stock of why there are effluents, especially in dry period, rain period, which are the works that will reject more, are they supposed to reject, discharge so much, and solve all those issues. So this sanitation master plan gives a list of all changes that need to be done to improve water quality and to have a bathing quality afterwards for the Olympic Games. Then after that, the problem, and it's the interest of the project, and during rainfall, there is we discharge our effluents, but unless if you have logics as the one that Mr. Piel mentioned, which is a retention of buffer ponds. Well, two things. First, among all the changes I mentioned in my presentation, which are taken into account in the scenario for simulation, is that, disinfection of wastewater treatment plant, correction of poor connections or branching. Some houses are built with, we should have a rainfall separative network, but there are places where both are collected and are combined and they'll go in the Seine River. One of my colleagues has a website called myconnection.fr, and you can call someone to check that the connection is appropriate or not. If it's not, well, you can ask for some funding to do work to correct that. Yeah. This is why the Mr. Piel's presentation was interesting. The Parapluie site developed in the SIAAP that makes it possible to smartly use water. It is for project for which the impermeable surface is lower than 1 hectare, and you can manage rainwater. And it was done by one of my colleagues from the SIAAP. All this is in the bathing objective and to improve water quality in the Seine or in the Marne. Yeah, I like this. I like that too. And I think we talk about hope, because I think we go towards this. So just to follow on Sofia's comment, with what the SIAAP does, and especially the echoes in the water agencies and in Paris is called the rain plan. The idea that the city should be spongious enough so that water doesn't run and does not pollute the nature through or overflows discharges. So over discharge. We're going back to the basis. How are we going to build a city that will be like a natural space that will collect water and that will infiltrate it? Water becomes a resource again, and we want to avoid pollution from accumulating and polluting the natural environment. So that's interesting indeed. We could say, okay, it concerns only the new cities because, but in fact, it's not so much the case. We have examples where this is what I find interesting right now, that, for example, we do a lot of de-impermeabilization missions. We get a lot of support from water agencies and collectivities. The collectivities get money from the agencies to de-impermeabilize. We see our ground that was impervious, how we can modify it. And there are several techniques which are interesting. Vagonscape, which is a landscaping agency, which remove they remove the crust, and they've so it's I think it's most interesting. In fact, slowly there are other usages, and nature comes back, and after that, the phytoremediation aspect, it parts of the phytoremediation. What I find most interesting today is that this approach, somewhat utopian approach. What's interesting is that, well, maybe I'm going a bit too far in my dream, but today, water agencies go into that direction. This is what's surprising. It's engineers in rainwater depollution, which today reactivate the city. We work in many local authorities. Water agency will finance urban planners within local authorities so that these urban planners would implement techniques for de-impermeabilization. So rather in thinking in terms of wastewater treatment plant, we know what was the job before. Now they to multiply wastewater treatment plant so as to in a sort of a mechanistic way they would deploy water. Now they did the opposite. What it means, let's face it, they're engineers, they're not poets, and they said, but the basis is that. So they're back to basics, and it's efficient. So I'm quite confident, actually.